Generic date views. Oh, interesting. Archive index view, a top level index page showing latest objects by date. This is interesting. I didn't know about this functionality. I've never used it, but seems it's in here. It's built in with Django. That's pretty cool. So what most likely it will do is render some sort of objects sorted by year, right? So that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Your archive view also kind of gets used, but my question is, how does it work with the models, or how does it know which model to take a look at, right? That's something we'll try and find out. Let's just figure it and stay with it. I get it. So what they have done is, in the mixin they have defined the get query set, and this is where you specify which objects to look for. So I bet this entry should be in the blog model. Let's just check. Yeah, it is right. So the entry is in the blog model, as you can see. This is interesting. I've learned something new. Alright, and the blog mixin view, what all does it implement? Get allowed features, get query set, get context data, so on and so forth, right? So get context data is called just before the template gets rendered. Again, this is used for passing certain information from, say, the Django or the Python land into the HTML, right? That's what the context is for. Get query set, again it tells what objects it is. So this is interesting, pretty cool. Events query set, that is events.objects.feature. Okay, this is something I have to find out. I am not really sure I understand what events.objects.feature really do. Cool. In any case, we did find out few things. Now let's look at the other applications that we have, right? So we have an accounts, we have an aggregator, we have a blog, we have a contact, dashboard, Django projects, fundraising, legacy. Okay, requirements. I think this will have all our pip dependencies. What does release has? Oh, cool. So the releases have whole bunch of things in it. Oh man, this is awesome. So typically what I do is, if I have a release coming along, I just create like a simple markdown file, send it off to client and call it a day, right? But not for Django. Django has its own set of models and admin interface control, I believe, for doing all that information. This is nice. This is pretty cool. So you have your major, version, micro, blah blah blah, whole bunch of things. You have cache property. Yeah, see, so this is the decorator thing that I was talking about. Let's just look at it, how the cache property is and where is it getting called from. So this is a cache property. Let's just look at the definition. What we can also do is figure out where the caching is happened. What I mean by that is it happening in Redis? And there used to be a thing called memcache. Let's see if it's still around. I'm not really sure. So before, by this you can guess how old I am. Redis, before Redis there was memcache, and this was created by the guy who created Blogger. But it seems like it is still around and it has nicer interface. I need to check out and do a comparison video on what has changed since then, right? So let's just check two things. One is, what is this cache property? Django utils, cache property. Yeah man, these days there is so much available built in directly into Django that, if I remember correctly, 3 to 4 years back you had to kind of use a third-party package for this, right? So that's pretty neat. At the rate cache property decorator caches the result of a method with a single self argument property. The cache results will persist as long as the instances do. Okay, so it basically does some caching, but now let us check where. Let's just look at the common.py, because that's where we'll come to know if they have caching. Do you have something like caching? Oh yeah, caching middleware. Okay, so the key is Django What is a backend? Do we have a backend out over here? Do we have a Redis? Not in here. Okay, how about dev or prod? Okay, so this in development it's using a dummy cache. What is it using in the production? Oh, I bet this has to be memcache. I mean, just by, oh yeah, it is memcache. Ah, see, so by default it will be memcached, and for documents and other pages, it's going to use Redis. Wow, this is nice. So seems like you can have multiple caches. So that's nice. That's nice. It is using both memcache as well as Redis. So that's nice. Cool. So what it means is for doc pages, for it to function, it's using Redis cache, and for everything else, it's using memcache. Cool. Excuse me. What else can we learn from this particular code base? I'm pretty sure. Okay, whenever you are encountering a new project, you don't know any jack thing about it, what you can do is look at the test, right? So we're just going to look some random test and see if we can kind of make sense out of it. Just for the sake of knowledge of our viewers, if you don't know what tests are, there's a thing called test driven development. Again, I'm not trying to mansplain you or kind of talk you down, but I'm trying to explain the basics if you don't already know, right? So let's just look at test driven development. So what's going to happen is typically you write a test first that fails, then you just write enough code to make it pass, and then you refactor, right? You might ask like, hey, what the hell do you refactor? You refactor two things, either the test themselves or the code that you have written, and you keep on doing this as long as you get good enough coverage, right? Again, bear in mind the purpose of test driven development is not to have 100% coverage. It is just to ensure that you have enough safety in it for us to be able to figure out if things don't work, right? So if you have a project that already has been into development and it didn't follow the TDD, and let me tell you again, with the same ratio, only one project that I know or have worked in past, or out of the 10 projects, they actually follow the TDD practice, right? In a sense that when the code gets committed, the PR also has test along to go with it, and the CI/CD also uses test, so that nothing kind of gets broken into production or development. Development, it's breaking all the time, that's fine, but in production you kind of come to know beforehand. So let's say if you have a project and you don't know how to get it into TDD, two strategies that you can use. One is ask yourself what is a core workflow and try to do a test coverage of that. The second strategy is anytime you get a new bug or you're implementing a new feature, that's a very nice segue into writing test, right? Or a good opportunity to write tests. So that's what you should be doing. So yeah, a little digression over here. This is template, and again, what it really boils down to is using asserts, right? So let me show you an example of what assert statement really does. So let's say if I say x is equal to true, and if I say assert x equal to false, it's going to give me an assertion error, right? So what it means is that we are expecting x to be false, but it's actually true. Now apart from test, let me also tell you where the assertion statements are used. Any business mission critical code, you would rather have it crash than go into an inconsistent state, right? So let me give an example. Let's say if you are hypothetically working on a banking project, you would rather have the transaction fail than be in a state where it got credited from one account but didn't get debited into another one, right? So in this mission critical statements, it's better to always add asserts into your live running code. So that's an example of where asserts are getting used apart from writing test. So let's go back. Yeah, again, nothing special, it's just doing a whole bunch of assertions. Class methods, right? So let me also explain what the class methods are. So in Django, is it a Django thing? I think it's a Python thing, it's not like a Django thing. What is probably a Python thing is if you decorate a method in Django with @property, you can kind of use that as an attribute and not a function. Now I'll give you an example. So let me give you an example. Let's just go to say account one. Let's say for the Django class profile, say hi is the method name, and we are going to just say print hi. Okay. So another key thing that I want to cover is the difference between a function and a method. So function exists in isolation, it doesn't belong to any class, but when you're talking about a function associated with a class, it's called a method, right? So this is a method in this case. If it's a method, you need to pass a self-referential object to it. So anytime you instantiate it, you can probably say something like p, again I'm just making this example up just for the heck of it, right? P profile.objects objects.last, and then you can say p dot say hi, right? So this is currently, but let's say if I want to use it as a property or an attribute, because sometimes let's say for derived attributes it's better to use it as a property. Let me give you an example. Let's say in this profile you had a date of birth, and from date of birth you want to find the age, number of years, right? So it's a derived property. For that you can use the property method, right? So you can do something like property, and now you don't need this curly braces, you can use it as an attribute. But what's interesting is, let's say if it was a class method, the way you could have used this is by just doing this. So what it means is you don't even need to instantiate this particular model, right? You can just directly use it. It's useful in certain scenarios, in certain scenarios it's not that useful. Where did our test go? Yeah, again it's doing a whole bunch of settings out over here, and then it's asserting that it shouldn't have. So yeah, which also brings me to the point, when you're writing test, you should write test or assert statement both for positive case as well as negative case, right? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're writing a magical function that adds 2 number. There are 2 ways to test it. When you do 1 plus 1, it should come out to be 2, but at the same time what you also want to do is you want to assert that add 1 plus 1 is not equal to 0, right? So those are both the positive and negative test cases that you need to take care of. That's where you have this assert not in, it's kind of doing some sort of a negative test cases, right? Cool. So what else can we learn of value from here? Yeah, another thing is migration. So Django community as a whole is kind of divided between should you be committing migrations versus you should not be committing migration, and again it depends on case to case and team to team, but it's a controversial topic. What's even controversial topic is the use of the class based use and function based use, because what's interesting is that Django went from function based to class based, but in React.js they went from class based to function based. So it's weird, right? One is going in this direction, the other one is going in this direction. So that's interesting. Yeah, I bet these guys have written their own template tags, and if you check this in the code base, right, this is how the template tag is getting used. Okay, we'll probably stop here. We have covered a lot. Again, when you're doing code review, don't want to be doing it more than 20-30 minutes, because after that your mind just gets saturated. We'll do a few more to understand this particular code base better, but let's just see if the virtual environment that we set up does it run or not, right? Nope, it doesn't. So there are certain packages that it's missing. We'll try to debug it next time, but for now let's just stop it. That's okay. Okay, so I hope you might have enjoyed this. I'll see you guys next time around.